Alright everyone, what I'm going to try to attempt to do today, hopefully I can do it in 10 minutes. If I can't, I'm going to do it as a two-parter. I get a lot of emails and discussions about from Christians about how they can prove through the prophets, the what they refer to as Old Testament, the Hebrew prophets, that it predicted Jesus's messiahship and salvation. And I want to address that today. I'm going to hit a couple of the major guys and give you a background history, and then try to finish this up with an explanation of how I see these prophets and how I see prophecy as a Jew. First of all, we're going to talk about Isaiah. Isaiah, you have Isaiah 53 and all this other stuff. And of course, all the information that I'm going to speak about is going to be obviously in the inbox. So look it over, read it, and enlighten yourself. Isaiah is not speaking about Jesus. And that's not just me saying this, but every theological scholar, every historical scholar, who he's speaking about is King Hezekiah and finally King Cyrus, who releases the Jews from the hands of the Syrians and returns them back into the land of Israel. When he says, "For us a son is born, a child is given," he is referring to King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah is the person who Isaiah is talking about. Most prophets speak about the time in which they live. That is how all of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, works. Things happen within the lifetime of the prophet, or within the area of the prophet's life. We know this because of Deuteronomy 13, which I'm going to touch on. But every prophet that speaks of an initial area. This goes for also Jeremiah and Hosea. Jeremiah was in the land of Judah, and like I said, read each one of these. And Hosea, who was in Israel, was in when the two kingdoms split after Solomon's death. The first prophecy both prophecies speaks about both captivities to Babylon. Hosea speaks about the 10 tribes and their committing idolatry and being dispersed to the 4 winds. And Jeremiah speaks about Judah feeling, well, God has protected us, so we can do whatever we want, and ends up going into the Babylonian captivity. This is the case. The prophets are speaking about their situation presently, in the present situation. And this is drawn out all through 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Kings, and so forth. These prophets speak about their historical situation. With the case of Jeremiah, he and Hosea, which were contemporaries at the time, were seeing two aspects of the same problem. Hosea saw idolatry and their just blatant disregard for God, to the point where God says, "Lo hamin, I no longer know you," and disperse you to the 4 winds. And Jeremiah says, well, I'm in Judea, and the Jews and the Levites and the Kohen are observing and obeying God by not being idolatrous, but they're not obeying the law, they're not obeying the Torah, and they eventually get taken out. But God does not Lo-Hami, does not say, "I no longer forget you because you've held on to my commandments and you held on to my covenant," which is a covenant that is eternal. Deuteronomy 30, 19 through 30. Check it. It's eternal. So I'm going to give you an example of a New Testament prophecy. You have John in Revelation. Now, everybody talks about 666 and the number of the beast, whatever. In some of the original documents, and you can research this yourself, some of the original documents of John's revelation does not have the number 666 in it. He has the number 616, and it's found in the earlier documents. And the gematria, the numerical word name, both in Hebrew and in Greek, comes up, 616 comes up with the name Nero, as in Nero Caesar. Don't forget, Nero was throwing Christians to the lions and crucifying them, and when he lit the place on fire, if you remember, the Nero fiddled while Rome burned, he blamed the fire on the Christians. Okay? So John, theoretically in the earliest documents, refers to, and this is what scholars are saying, many of the scholars looking at the original documents, that John is referring to a prediction that Nero will cause the destruction and suppression and the martyring of early Christians, which he did, and that at the end of the collapse of the Roman Empire, there'll be 1,000 years where Jesus will reign. What happens exactly at the end of this huge tribulation period between Nero and then into Hadrian? What happens after that? Constantine. What does Constantine do? He brings about the Holy Roman Empire, which stands from approximately 500 AD to 1500 AD, when Luther protests or tries to reform the Catholic Church. Now, though you can also say that when you look at Revelation, you can also see, if you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, a lot of similarities to what is called the War Scroll of the Qumran community, and we can go into that in a different video. But what I'm trying to say is that prophets prophesize within their own lifetime. This is historically true. Now, both Judaism and Christianity and Islam, with the exception of the Mormon Church, say that there are no longer needs of prophecy because all the prophecy has been done, which I disagree with because of this one statement. I'm holding a Chumash, the Torah, and Moses knew that there would be prophets all through life, all through the time, and each prophet had to live within the time of whatever tribulation, whatever time of Jacob's trouble that we refer to happens. And this is the reason why I'm going to read Deuteronomy 13, is because many people are going to beg the question once they read the documentation that I have here and everything. All right, so how do I know who's a false prophet and who's a true prophet? And here's the answer. Deuteronomy 13. The entire word that I have commanded you, that shall you observe to do, you shall not add to it, and you shall not subtract from it. If there should stand up in your midst a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he will produce to you a sign or a wonder, and that sign or wonder comes about, of which he spoke of, and he says, let us follow other gods, and you do not know, and we shall worship them. Do not hearken to the words of the prophet or the dreamer of dreams, for the Lord, Hashem, your God, is testing you to know whether you love God or not. I'm paraphrasing because there's words like this in Hashem. And they say you should stone him. Now, when you read the Hebrew, it says ways and other gods. In other words, separate from the Torah. So if anybody says to you, I'm making a prediction, and the prediction comes true, and he says, I've had a vision or a dream, and the dream comes true, and he turns around and says, we no longer need to follow the Torah, the law, any longer. We will now obey and pray to, this man God here, or this king here, or this Caesar there. That person is being brought to you by God to be tested to you. So this is what I'm trying to tell you. Prophets will arise, but Deuteronomy 13 explains exactly how you can tell the difference between a true prophet and a false prophet. I hope this was educational to you.